MacArthur Genius Fellowship on Sunday, February 23rd at the Ritz-Carlton Amelia Island. Tickets at aicmf.org or by calling their box office. The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler. On today's First Coast Connect, award-winning podcaster and this show's former host, Al Letson, joins us to discuss his new project, a deep dive into candid and difficult conversations. Later, Girl Scouts are more than cookie pushers. We ask the group's local CEO where the money for all those Thin Mints ends up. And we preview the diverse sounds coming to the JME Soundstage series, from indie pop to psychedelic soul. You can join the conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or reach out on social media. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump's envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, has arrived in Kyiv for talks.
It's good to be back in Kyiv again. To have some wonderful talks with President Zelensky and his staff and military commanders. It's kind of nice that I'm here just a few days before the third anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
His comments come as President Trump said he blamed Ukraine for starting the war 3 years ago. That is not true. It was Russia that launched the surprise, full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, and it has continued to bomb that country ever since. Kellogg's visit to Ukraine comes a day after Ukraine was excluded from talks between U.S. and Russian diplomats over ending the war. European officials were not allowed to attend either. More than 10,000 federal employees have been fired in the new Trump administration. Most of them were on probationary status. NPR's Andrea Hsu reports on the efforts to file class action lawsuits challenging the dismissals.
Federal employees typically have to get through 1 or 2 years of probation before they have full civil service job protections. Still, attorneys say even without those protections, they may still have a case. Many of the workers fired were told that their performance failed to demonstrate that their employment was in the public interest. David Branch is a longtime employment attorney in Washington, D.C.
If you can prove that this statement is false, you probably have a claim for infringement upon your good name and reputation under the Fifth Amendment.
The Trump administration says the terminations are about cutting waste and making government more efficient. Andrea Hsu, NPR News.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul is considering whether to remove New York City Democratic Mayor Eric Adams from office. The governor held meetings with top civic and political leaders from the city yesterday. NPR's Brian Mann reports the mayor is in the midst of an alleged corruption scandal.
Mayor Adams was charged last year with federal bribery and corruption charges. Last week, the Trump administration's DOJ agreed to suspend that criminal case. It was a move so controversial, 7 DOJ attorneys resigned rather than go along with it. Critics say Adams leveraged the favor from Trump's team after agreeing to collaborate with the White House's crackdown on illegal immigration. After 4 of Adams' own top aides resigned this week, Governor Hochul began talks with officials about whether to use her authority to remove Adams from office. It's unclear when she'll decide. Brian Mann, NPR News, New York.
Separately, a federal judge has called a hearing today about Mayor Adams' case. The judge has asked the U.S. Justice Department to be prepared to explain why it's trying to drop charges against the mayor. An Arctic blast is parked across much of the central U.S. this morning. Wind chill temperatures are 40 degrees below zero in North Dakota. You're listening to NPR.
You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning, I'm Stephen Ponson. It's 9:04. JEA is selling its former Church Street headquarters almost 2 years after moving its Customer Solutions Center and corporate offices to a 7-story building on Pearl Street. The 19-story building was built back in the 1960s with a rotating restaurant on the top floor. JEA is also selling its old 6-story customer center next door, as well as a 513-space parking garage on Laura Street and a 190-space parking deck. The deadline to bid on the various properties is Tuesday, April 8th. Legislation passed last year empowering law enforcement to remove squatters from private property may soon be expanded. Republican Senator Ana Maria Rodriguez says the change would include residential and now commercial properties.
This bill creates a non-judicial procedure for a property owner to request that the county sheriff immediately remove an unauthorized person from commercial real estate property. This procedure is like procedures in existing law for the removal of an unauthorized person from a residential property. As you all may recall, we recently passed a squatters bill on residential properties, so this would basically be for commercial properties, and that is the bill.
A wave of other states has passed similar laws cracking down on squatters. This comes as the U.S. is currently in a housing shortage, and U.S. News & World Report ranks Florida among the bottom 10 states when it comes to housing. Here in Northeast Florida, it's going to be a rainy day with showers and storms in the forecast. Eventually, the rain will push offshore during the early evening hours. Highs will get into the lower 60s today.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Eric and Wendy Schmidt through the Schmidt Family Foundation, working toward a healthy, resilient, secure world for all. On the web at theschmidt.org. This is NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, the award-winning host of the Reveal podcast unveils his latest audio project. We preview more to the story with Al Letson. Later in the program, we're joined by WJCT's arts and culture editor Matt Shaw for a preview of the musical medley coming to the JME soundstage. But first, I'm delighted to welcome back the former host of this program, back to Studio 2, this time on the other side of the mic, Al Letson. Good morning.
Hey. Good morning.
Hey, it's great to have you here, Al. Thanks for coming in. So you are rolling out a new podcast, just going to say, like, in your spare time?
Yeah, in my spare time.
Yeah. You're a busy guy. You've got a lot going on. I mean, you're not just the Reveal host. You're a writer in Hollywood. You are working on TV shows. You're working on a comic. Can you just catch me up a little bit on where you are creatively right now?
If I do that, I'm going to be exhausted. I'm just saying it out loud. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, I host Reveal, which is on over 500 NPR stations across the country,
including here in Jacksonville.
Thankfully here in Jacksonville. And so of course that's a podcast reaching. I think we're doing like about 1 million listeners. So I'm doing that. Then I'm writing a comic book for DC Comics, Mr. Terrific. Mr. Terrific #1 will come out May 28th. It worked out that we're talking today because DC just announced it yesterday. So
sweet.
Yeah.
Mr. Terrific. So when you say you're writing a comic, are you going to be doing like more than one edition of this character?
Yeah, so he is like it's going to be a 6-issue miniseries. And a thing that happens in comics, specifically with DC Comics, is they do this idea called Year One. And so like the most famous example is they did Batman Year One, and it was like really like going back and looking at how Batman became Batman. It's not really an origin story, but it's like his first year as a rookie going out, doing this stuff. So I am working on it's a mini series, and we're doing 6 issues. And it starts in May, and I've been working on it for a bit. Kind of the way it all happened is that there's a new Superman movie coming out in I think June or July. And Mr. Terrific is one of the characters in it.
Oh, wow.
So I pitched DC almost like 2 years ago to do a miniseries on Mr. Terrific, and they were very interested. And then images from the movie came out with Mr. Terrific, and then they thought, okay, we got to do this. So I'm doing that.
And we
Um,
should say, I mean,
yeah.
you're a
Go ahead.
kind
No,
of
go
a
ahead.
comic book nerd,
Oh my
right?
God, huge comic book nerd.
What's different about writing for? I mean, you've written poems, you've written plays, you've
hmm
written for TV.
It is so different because like telling a story sequentially means that like you're thinking about panel to panel and how characters move and how they talk. Whereas like with a movie, it's kind of or a TV show, it's like straight through, right? Like you don't have to think about like, okay, so he's here and then he's here, and how do I explain getting over there? In a script, you just write, okay, they go over there. So it's really it's a different muscle, and it feels a lot like a puzzle. Like when I'm putting together a comic book, it's really like trying to make all the pieces work. I love it though. I love all of I love writing. So I love when I'm like writing a script. I love when I'm when I'm writing a TV script. I love it. It's a different type of muscle, uh,
Do you
opposed to
work?
like comic books.
Are you working with an artist on this,
hmm
and how do you how do you storyboard so you know what you're writing and they know what they're drawing?
Yeah. So like we pitch out what the whole idea is of the issue, and then me and the artist kind of talk through like big moments. Before I get started, I always love to ask an artist, what do you love to draw? Like what makes you happy? And so I'm always thinking about that when I'm thinking about how I'm telling the story. And I think like the principles of storytelling translate from TV film to comic books as well, as in like, with a TV show, you're always writing for the break. You're always writing for that place where like either there's a commercial or the story is about to end. So you're trying to ramp up the action or ramp up the tension so that when the break comes, people come back to watch it, right? So with a comic book, you're writing for the end, and that's the break. So you want to have a cliffhanger at the end of every book, and so that's what I've been. So that's kind of like the guiding light that I use when I'm putting these together. And then I give them a script, and then we talk about it. He tells me what he sees. I try with a comic book script. I try not to be too much like telling him exactly what needs to be in the frame or in the panel. I kind of just say like this needs to happen, and this is what the characters are saying, and then he goes and I let he does his art. Like I think it's really important in a comic book that like as a writer I have my art, and as an artist he has his art, and we respect each other and kind of work together. So the two artists that I'm working with on Mr. Terrific have been great. We've had a blast, and once this thing is done, they're in one of them is in Canada and one of them is in Peru, and we're already planning to meet at a Comic Con and just and catch up. So
Wow.
it's been great. It's been great.
So that's one of your projects.
Yes, that's one that just got announced. I have been developing a TV show with a major network and some really big producers, and we're moving that forward. I can't say a whole bunch about it, but we're moving that forward, and
Are you
that's
allowed
pretty
to
good.
say like kind of what the vibe is or the genre? Is it like a
No, I mean, yeah, no, I'd like to keep it a secret until it's announced. I'll just say that it's a drama, and I'll say that I am working with some people who have some really impressive credits, things that everybody has seen before. Things, a show that, at one point was a real cultural phenomenon. And
and so
so
it's greenlit, but it's not announced.
it's the writer's room is greenlit. So like in TV, like a lot of times, especially now, it's like you have these different phases of it. And so I was in a development stage when I was, thinking of the idea and writing the pilot script. And then once the pilot script was done, they liked it and they move you into a writer's room. And so at the end of the writer's room, they'll make a decision about whether they're going to create the show or not. So we're in that middle phase, the writer's room, which is big deal.
And when you assuming that gets to fruition, like what is your title on that production? What is your role?
So in that role, I am the showrunner.
Wow.
I'm a co-showrunner. So I haven't run a show before. I've been on 6 different TV shows as a writer. Um,
Explain. I mean, I
Sure.
know the term and I know that it's a hugely important
Hmm.
piece of any production, but I'm not sure I really it's kind of everything, right?
Yeah, so I mean, the easiest way to think of a showrunner is the CEO of. If you think of like the series or the show as a business, the CEO, the showrunner is the CEO. The showrunner does everything from hiring the people who work on set to hiring the actors to being the head writer to communicating with the network. All of that stuff. It's a huge job. And because I've never done it before, I hired or the network hired a co-showrunner, so we'll be doing it together.
Hmm.
And the co-showrunner has done it before, so I'll be learning a lot from him. And yeah, it's exciting. And this project is something I've been working on for almost because TV is slow. Like I pitched them. Let's see, I pitched them in 22 in January of 22. And so we've just been going since 22 to right now. And I can't tell you how many times I've done this process before and it never got this far, for one reason or another. So yeah, like, no, I'm super excited. The producers I'm working with are pretty excellent. And yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, it's a big job. It's a big job. I mean, it's like being your typical TV show. Uh, Probably is running about your average TV show is probably running about 8 million an episode, but you can also there's a lot of them that are doing 5 as well, especially now like after the strike things have gotten a lot cheaper. So if you're doing 8 episodes, that's a lot of money that you're entrusted with that you got to figure out. So yeah, it's a big deal. But
That's huge. And so is that all that you're working on right now?
no,
Okay. Please continue.
no. So the comic book, and the TV show, and then Reveal, and this new podcast, which is going to drop on Wednesdays. It's called More to the Story, and it's me doing exactly what you're doing right now, like a one-on-one interview show with a guest.
Yeah.
Which I'm excited for. It's just it's just a lot.
Yeah.
But I'm excited for it.
And it's called More to the Story. That's always been your tagline
Yep.
on Reveal. That's kind of how you sign off
Yep.
when you do the episodes. What does that phrase just kind of mean to you personally? Why is that something that you started saying in the first place?
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest, I started saying it in the first place. Like, I think I did it on the second episode of Reveal 10 years ago, and we just needed a tagline. It was what came out. But over the years, it has begun. It is meant to me that I think that Reveal is a very different beast than most news programs in the sense that we're not necessarily tied to the news of right now. We're more tied to the idea of doing these deep investigations and giving you a better understanding of the world. I like to think that like the work that Reveal does is really about giving context to the news that you hear every day. I think part of the problem with news is that we hear a story, but we don't get the context in which we hear that story. So we don't quite understand it. And I think that like that's what our job is to do, is to come in and kind of fill in those blanks. And so there's always more to the story. And so what we're doing with this podcast, with this new Wednesday drop, is really like telling the story of the world that we live in today, but kind of going deeper and kind of looking behind the scenes, i.e. like one of the interviews I did for this was with Bob Schenck, who was kind of the architect, I would say, of a lot of the Christian nationalist movements that we see happening now. And that was great.
I actually want to listen to a little bit of that interview because it is pretty dramatic. He has sort of turned against Trump and Christian conservatism, even though that was his wheelhouse for so long.
Yeah.
Let's listen to a little bit of what he had to say.
This is the first time, Al, I'm going to say this in a public forum. I don't think you can be a Christian and embrace Donald Trump, because I see him as the antithesis of everything Jesus stood for, everything he modeled, and in my theology, everything he died for.
So that's a pretty dramatic reveal there.
Yeah.
For somebody, he even says it's nothing he's ever said publicly. That must have kind of surprised you.
Yeah, it was that interview was intense in all the right ways. It was a 2-hour interview, like, and as an interviewer, like going on for 2 hours, that's
You're
a long,
pretty
long
tired, yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a 2-hour interview, and we just talked about everything. I think my style of interviewing people is that I really love to dive deep, and so what I tend to do is, as they're giving a little bit of themselves, I give a little bit of myself. I listen, and I am listening for. Listen, I've been in therapy for a long time, so like I take the tools that my therapist uses on me and use them on other people. Like I listen really intently and try to get under the thing that they're talking about. Like if they're talking about this, there's something else going on under it, and I really want to understand that. I feel like now that I'm talking to you about it, I feel like that is kind of been the root of my success in certain areas, even in TV, because in TV you turn in a script and you have notes calls with executives, and the way you move forward in TV is being able to adjust to those notes, being able to understand it. And the thing about those notes is that, like, you have to know what's under the note. It's not about what they're writing or what they say to you. It's about something that they read or something that they saw made them feel something. And if you can figure out what that feeling is that they didn't like, then you can correct that the way you want to correct it, and not necessarily not the prescriptive way that they may put in the notes. It's huge. If you can do that, you get a long career. And I think that I use that same skill. I think I got that skill from interviewing people and really trying to get under what it is that they're actually saying and get to, like, what are they feeling? Like,
Yeah.
why did they come to that place?
It requires a whole bunch of creativity to kind of
Yes.
think in that way. But you're right. Then you can sort of move forward in a way that is more amenable to what it is that you're trying to accomplish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I want to take a call from Charles on the West Side. Good morning, Charles. Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. And Al, I've got a question I've been dying to ask you ever since the 50th anniversary of hip hop. But first, I think the cop, the deputy sheriff, I think he killed Billy Joe, the football player, with the shotgun, and on reveal,
Mm-hmm.
But my question is, I think, I was a kid back then, but in 1970, James Brown came out with a song called King Heroin with a lengthy soliloquy, if you will. And to me, I think that's the first rap song. Could you agree with that?
I would say maybe. Like I think that I think I heard a song from the 40s, and these guys were rapping, or it wasn't the 40s, it was probably the 50s, and these guys it was on a TV show, and these guys they were rapping, they were straight up rapping. So I don't know, it could be. I'm not that type of hip hop historian. I mean, I know hip hop because I've lived it, but I don't know the specifics of it. And before you go, though, I just want to thank you for listening to Mississippi Goddamn, the Ballad of Billy Joe. That is my definitely, I don't know, that's my kind of my opus in journalism, and it means the world to me that you listen to it. And as far as your idea that the cop did it, I don't know. I wish I could tell you that I agree or disagree, but I do not know. As somebody that like researched it for a long time, there were days when I thought like he did, and there were days when I thought that he didn't. And but ultimately, like, my job with that story was to make Billy Joe's family feel like they had been heard and let Billy Joe got the investigation he deserved.
And that, for people who don't know, Mississippi Goddamn is a 7-part investigation that you did. It won a Murrow. It won a bunch of awards.
Yeah.
And it was a real deep dive. It's kind of named after the Nina Simone song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and I think that really kind of goes directly to what I was talking about earlier with context. Like, I think that the story very easily could have been like a true crimey story. But I didn't want to do that. Like, I wanted to take the death of this young black man who died under suspicious circumstances. And I wanted to connect the dots between how his family saw him dying, a poor black family in rural Mississippi, versus how a lot of white people around them saw his death. And it's all about history and context, and the fact that his family has to live that history every day, and the white people around them not so much. And so the way they looked at his death was very different. And so, like, what I was trying to do is dive deep into that and bring kind of all of that together.
You say you didn't want it to come across as a true crime type podcast, and Lord knows there's a lot of those right now. I mean, podcasts, television, everything. What is it about that true crime genre that troubles you or that you wanted to avoid?
Well, I mean, I'll say um, I don't judge people with my ruler, in the sense of like what you like. You know, look, I'm a comic nerd. I love comic books, and if people don't like comic books, I don't care. Like every time I travel, I go. The first thing I do is find a comic shop to see what they got. If true crime is your thing, I am not judging anybody. Like, do your thing. It's what you love. One of my dearest friends, Bree Burge, loves true crime. Like, it's all good, right? For me and the story of Billy Joe Johnson, I felt like true crime would kind of sensationalize it and make it feel like that wasn't the story I wanted to tell. If I wanted to do true crime, I could have. But like, to me, it was much more interesting to talk about Billy Joe in context to everything that goes on around Mississippi